Hey, good afternoon to all of you. So we're going to have a cozy seminar webinar. First of all, Amit Dek is going to present a project which we are developing under the umbrella of the Emilia-Romagna region, education project. And then very happy to have Luca and Dan, then they're going to present themselves. A seminar on economic development and very crispy stuff, I guess. So thank you very much for being here, first of all. Then so first, Amy, you're presenting something, then I don't know whether Luca first, Dance, I don't know. I think maybe Luca first, but and up to you. And then tough questions. We are here, yeah, not really close, but we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9 people, 9 people. Maybe more can. So, Amy, the floor is yours.
Thank you for giving me the floor. So I need only 2 minutes to present our school, our project. Let me share a few slides for presenting our project. I hope that you can see them online and also in presence. I'll check them, yes. So CHASE, Circular Economy Innovation and Skills, is a project founded by Emilia-Romagna region, and the project coordinator is University of Ferrara. This project is a 2-year project, 2025 and 2026. So today we are in the 2nd year of this project that have 2 different aim. The first one is the organization of 3 workshops, and we are here for the first one for this year in presence and online in hybrid way. And this is a chance for presenting also the next 2 workshop next Monday and also next month in April with Professor Aliano on sustainable finance. And the second aim of the project is the organization of an international school. The first year of school was last year, and now we are approaching for organizing the 2nd year of the school. So just very briefly, just some modules that you can attend during this 5 weeks school: sustainable development and industrial production, economic evaluation, budgeting, risk management. So a lot of topics that are related with circular economy and to the new business models for circular economy. So new digital technologies and all the other topic related to the circular evaluation. Now, as I said, we are approaching of organizing the 2nd year of the international school. So if you are interested in, you can check on website of University of Ferrara. There you can find all information for your submission, and for us, it's here. It's a very pleasure to be here and presenting our project. So I have just finished with my very short presentation, as I promised, and I don't know. I can give the floor to Luca. I don't know if it's the first one, the first speaker.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just interrupting my screen, the sharing of my screen, so you can.
I am. Wait, share the entire screen. You should be able to see my presentation now.
Yes, thank you, Luca, for for being with us in our project. And Luca is an Italian economist, international development consultant. He has a lot of years of experience, and I hope that our student, especially our student, can benefit of your experience and insight of the topics of blue economy and sea conservation. You are actually a very good photographer on sea contents, and I follow you on Instagram. So
That's the most important part.
yeah.
Okay. You want me to start, Amy?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay. So first of all, thanks everybody for taking the time and for joining today. And it's now almost become a yearly appointment. I mean, I've been there last year, and I think we had a seminar even the year before. So some of you may already heard a lot of the things that I'm going to share with you, the ideas and the experiences. Apologies if there is some repetition. It's just that my life is not that exciting. I kind of keep doing the same professional stuff. But today, just to bring you in the right space, today we're going to speak to you as practitioners, right? This is Dan, that I will introduce in a minute, and myself. We are people that work in economic development for bilateral, multilateral donors. A little bit about myself. I started in 2023, and then I worked for European bilaterals at the beginning, like the UK government in Africa, and then multilaterals with the World Bank. And then from there, I was managing and designing projects. So a donor puts a bunch of money on the table to achieve a specific developmental objective, say that they want to grow the agriculture sector in Mozambique. They put that money on the table, and then there are implementers like Don and myself that would then design how that money is being spent, and then would implement the spending and then would report back on the results. And these are normally 4 to 5 years cycles in terms of programming for this kind of projects. So this has been primarily the type of business we've been doing. And from then Africa, my experience then has spanned in many different countries, in Asia, in Latin America, and so on, and working for different donors. In the last 10 years, I think most of my work, at least, has been with USAID, so with the American government. And there in the photo, you can see, you know, this was our team in Mozambique. Dan is obviously in the middle of the picture there, looking the same as he's looking now. And I'm there on the side. And we were working together in Mozambique until, I think, from 2015 to COVID, to the time of COVID, where I actually left Mozambique overnight. Yes, so shall I take it forward from there? Do you want to say anything, Dan, to add to the picture I've given of you? I should also add that Dan at the moment is teaching this kind of things as well, focused on system thinking, and what we're going to present today at Columbia University. So today is just going to be on excursus based on our practical experience, but drawing from the experience and trying to give you a hint, a sense of what kind of thinking, what kind of frameworks, what kind of approaches go into the design, the implementation, and the development of a program, and how donors have been, the thinking of donors has evolved over the last years to take on board a lot of the learnings that is also coming from academia, and to improve the impact and the kind of results that they achieve per dollar spent in a project. So we are taking you through these excursus a little bit. We'll take you from system thinking applied in general, then to a version of it that is applied in blue economy, so in coastal areas. And then we will have a little bit of a short, deep look at how this applies to the case of Galápagos, which is where I'm working at the moment for a report for the AFC and the World Bank. So I'll now pass the word to Dan, that is going to take us through the first part.
Yeah, thank you, Luca. And it's great to be with everyone today. So I want to give a little bit of context for market systems development, which is the type of USAID project that Luca and I collaborated together on in Mozambique, because it sets up what he's going to share about expanding ideas for market systems development in the Galápagos case study. So market systems development, or MSD, didn't come from nowhere. Economic development practitioners that, like us, who have worked for bilateral or multilateral donors in emerging economies, have always been inspired by a spirit of self-criticism. People like me and Luca know when things aren't working and are always trying to make things better. And we've and our forebears in our profession have always drawn on academic traditions when ideas from economics or sociology or ecology have helped us do our work better, and in some cases given us an excuse to do our work in a better way. A few of the challenges that we have faced in the past and continue to face are around sustaining development over time and ending dependency. So programs are often temporary. They're always temporary, and they're often less than 5 years. So we're asked to produce systemic change that goes beyond the length of the donor funding and gives them an exit strategy. Inclusion is also really important. The benefits are meant to accrue often to poor people or marginalized communities, not just benefiting the existing power structure. And then we're often expected to have a goal of strengthening the system's own capacity to adapt. So not just helping the system move to a specific point, but being able to evolve and adapt in an ongoing way. So what I have on this, what you can see on the slide here, is a sort of very simple timeline of a number of economic development approaches that move from a sort of post-war period focused more on directly delivering aid that met basic human needs through a number of other approaches. And along the way, different ideas from the academy, from universities have been incorporated. So for instance, the subsector approach recognized that for businesses to become competitive in a globalizing world, they need to be clustered into subsectors. And that drew on ideas about competitiveness from Michael Porter at HBS, business economics, and also began to dip its toes into systems thinking and simple systems mapping. The Making Markets Work for the Poor, or M4P approach, emerged from the UK's DFID and the Swiss, the SDC, in the early aughts, and it drew on ideas about transactions in institutional economics to understand why markets as an institution fail the poor, and it focused on promoting. It focused on changing institutional constraints so that markets were more effective for the poor. And the core logic of M4P, which then became is sort of now considered MSD and blended with the USAID value chain approach, is that rather than providing goods or services directly, it's about identifying systemic constraints, rules, norms, the sort of supporting functions in a market system that prevent markets from working inclusively. So we try to target root causes, not symptoms, and use facilitation rather than what we would call direct delivery to make sure that the changes that we are pushing for outlast our program. There are a lot of ongoing self-criticism and external criticism, and over time, as you can see here, we've brought in ideas from behavioral economics, systemic resilience, and more recently, environmental or ecological economics to improve our practice. And looking towards the future, there are a number of directions that this field could go. It's a sort of a pivotal moment in our field, but we'll come back to that near the end of our presentation to speculate a little bit about where this could go. But next, I want to talk about the sort of core. Luca?
Done?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I think this is a very clear discourses, and I really like the slide, although and maybe on my computer it comes, there's some overlapping images. But I wanted to ask you one or two questions, if you don't mind. I know we didn't prepare that. And but for example, if we talk about systemic change, should we? What is a systemic change? That's a difficult question, but basically,
Sure.
I can help you out as well.
Yeah, no, I think the way, and I think we all think about these things a little bit differently and have different anecdotes. So please, add on to this. When I think about a systemic change, I look at sort of fundamental structures that change power balances or change fundamental behaviors that we see in the market system. I know that's kind of abstract, and we'll be giving some examples in the talk. But yeah, it's more than just about increasing incomes or introducing a new business practice that helps a specific partner business grow and thrive. It's really about making those underlying institutions enable transactions to happen in a different way and sort of institutional economics framing. Do you want to add to that, Luca?
No, thanks. So what I understand from all of these excursus, and if there's something I can take away, is that over time, donors have stopped thinking about, okay, there's a poor farmer, he doesn't have access to good seeds, so let us go and give him a package of good seeds so that he's better off. Donors have stopped thinking about that and spending money in that way because they've realized that is not sustainable, because the farmer the next season will still need somebody to give him free seeds. And that instead focused on how markets deliver those services to those farmers, how inclusive they are, why farmers do not have access to those seeds. Is somebody distributing those seeds to them? Is a company thinking about the bottom of a pyramid? Is there finance for them to buy them on credit? Or is there even demand for the products that these seeds would produce so that the farmer can have the income the next year? So they have broadened that up and looked at institutional economics, rules, even structures of power, if you want, behaviors, understanding of how certain sectors of the market work by their own market actors. So changing that understanding of the market actors, of where the opportunities are, to then push that market to become more inclusive and grow in a more indirect way. That's kind of the indirect. So I think this is the takeaway. All right, I'll keep quiet now.
No, that's excellent. Thank you, Luca. So the way that we attempt to facilitate those changes is through kind of what we call the MSD donut. And this is approximately sort of close to the classic presentation of this donut that represents a core transaction of goods and services in the middle. This is sometimes represented as a value chain going from supply on one side to demand on the other. And then around the outside, the supporting functions, which I think Luca can animate for me, that include rules and norms that enable this core transaction to happen. So for example, in the context of a fishing market system, that core market might run from fisher folk who catch and sell fish, sometimes directly to consumers or restaurants, but then also sometimes via a whole chain of bulk buyers, wholesalers, and retailers, people who buy and sell and consume fish. Supporting functions in a fishery market system could include suppliers of fishing equipment like nets and boats, technology and services for transportation and cold chain logistics, or credit and savings products for the core, those core value chain actors. And then, of course, in this visualization of the system, the natural resources that provide the climate and enable productive fisheries and hatcheries in the sea, inland watersheds, or coastal features like mangroves. And then rules might include traditional fishing rights, regulations, and regulators that enforce fishing quotas, industry standards around food safety, and also cultural norms, right? Who catches fish, what kind of people sell fish in that culture, what kind of fish get prepared for whom and how. And I think it's as shown in this sort of Homer Simpson plate of donuts, a supporting function like providing that equipment to fisher folk in one market system donut might actually be the center, might be the core transaction of its own market system donut with its own rules and supporting services. And so you can visualize an economy as really a collection of many different overlapping and interconnected donuts, which is what that messy visualization on the right is showing. And I think what's important to remember is that MSD practitioners use this as just sort of a lens to analyze the system moving from one core area of interest to another core area of interest. And what this framework or this visualization allows MSD practitioners to do is to apply some core principles to our work. Principles like systemic analysis, looking at the donut, looking into supporting functions, looking into rules and norms as a way to get at root causes, not just symptoms. Commercial viability and scale, because we are facilitators, because we are not permanently part of this market system, we need things to be commercially viable. They need to be profitable for people, whether that means sort of socially or financially. Luca sort of mentioned the idea of being facilitators, facilitating change instead of directly delivering it. So the market actors themselves need to drive the change for it to be viable in the long term. So we are often working through partnerships with businesses and other permanent market actors. But we're careful not to replace any market functions. And that is what ensures continuity after the 5-year or longer program. And then finally, the original P in M for P was about making markets work for the poor. We now just really call that market systems development and have expanded that to other marginalized populations, and some have even experimented with other social or environmental outcomes. But there's a really strong tradition of looking at the poor and their inclusion in the market system. This is a great approach. I love the systemic aspect of it, but it does have some limitations. There's some good evidence on the impact of the MSD approach on market level outcomes, like making prices, volumes, market access more competitive in the global economy, and also more inclusive of the poor. Many MSD programs also show excellent cost effectiveness, partly because they're relying on partnerships with businesses that contribute to some of the cost, and partly because of this idea of piloting small things that will then naturally go to scale. And there is some confirmed systemic change in the review literature in agricultural and financial markets in East Africa and South Asia, for example. But there's some empirical limitations. There's thinner evidence for really deep systemic change. So in terms of changing rules, norms, and power structures, there's just less evidence of this approach being successful for this. And other areas like sensitivity to conflict or catalyzing major policy shifts. But I wonder if anyone in the room can, looking at this donut, can spot a major theoretical limitation, what I would consider a theoretical error in this donut. And Luca's giving you a clue of where that might be. Does anyone, you're welcome to come off mute or drop something in the chat. All right. Well, despite market systems development, as we showed in that first slide, drawing on ideas from systems thinking, people like Howard Odom or Dana Meadows, MSD was never really designed to deal with ecological systems. The donut framing that I'm showing you focuses so much on that core economic transaction that it really forces the social and biophysical components of the system into a sort of transactional economic paradigm that just isn't how the world works, right? It's just not how it's not how our biophysical world, it's not how our society works. So MSD assumes private goods traded in markets, for example, but ocean ecosystems are commons, right? Fish stock, water quality, biodiversity can't really be treated as a market failure the same way we can look at, affordability of, an agricultural input. So, ultimately, the microeconomic origins and Porter's ideas about competitiveness make it difficult to reconcile our approach with questions of the commons and global environmental issues. Nevertheless, whether we like it or not, Herman Daly articulates really effectively that economies need to fit within ecological planetary limits. Fundamentally, putting natural resources as one little sliver of supporting functions in a market systems donut is just incorrect. Anecdotally, and I was kind of surprised to come to the field and hear this word used this way, when MSD practitioners talk about sustainability, what they mean is that their work, their practices continued beyond the end of the intervention. So they may say, well, we helped commercialize this local fishery. Isn't this great? The market actors continued those practices. And I might say, yeah, but you're driving, traditional fisher folk who fish, closer to shore. You're driving them out of the business, and you're depleting fish stocks faster than the replacement rate. Like that's just not what sustainability means. And so that's something that we've been contending with as a field. We've made some good progress. There was a new greening MSD framework that came out last year that takes a few important steps. It's the new green MSD donut that I teach to my students at Columbia. And we're working on changing some of that sustainability language this year in a revision of a guide. But just speaking personally as a practitioner who actually came into international development working on agroforestry in Haiti, I don't really feel that the current frameworks live up to our intellectual heritage when we look at folks like Odom or Eleanor Ostrom or Dana Meadows. And so I continue to look for a framework that fully brings ecological principles to MSD. And on that note, Luca, I'd like to hand back to you to present the Blue Economy Change Wheel and the SEAS framework.
Thank you, Don. Let me see if I can turn on my camera before. Yeah, I should be able to see me. Okay, thanks. So this is a very interesting excursus, and this is a kind of a dead end where both Don and I, we both come to the same dead end because as my interest was growing into working in coastal areas at the intersection between ecological system and socioeconomic systems, the MSD toolbox was not providing enough for us to then treat this in a serious way. So we've been working to expand the framework and to do it in a way that is familiar with the practitioners, so that is perceived as a strengthening of the toolbox rather than a criticism or designing something completely new. And here I'm going to present a few of these ideas, and which, by the way, in part have already been applied. We have applied this framework in Mozambique for a new project in the north. There was about $24 million that was working with fisher folks in a very poor area of Mozambique that is also affected by tensions, and also in the Solomon Islands, where I'm currently working with WWF on sea grapes production, and in Galápagos, which is the case that I'm showing to you. So I'm going to do this in two steps. First, I'm showing you the framework a little bit. We call it SEAS, or socio-ecological approach to sustainability, and extending the MSD logic that Dan just presented. And then we'll go through the application using a Blue Economy diagnostic tool that is based on this. So how is SEAS changing from what MSD used to do? When we say blue economy, we already accept that the ocean is both a productive system and an ecological system. So SEAS takes that ontological concept and actually makes it explicit. You cannot have fisheries without the fish. So the problem is that, as I explained, that the tools that we have do not work in the same ontological space. So that needs to change. And in order to do this, SEAS, well, I'm using a concept that I call dual productivity, but it's something that you're already familiar in literature. Is similar to co-benefits, but is a little bit more than that. So co-benefits are some sort of an investment in one purpose, and the system happens to produce secondary gains in another domain. May this be an environmental domain, and therefore it still kind of has within it this dichotomy, this separation. Protect the marine environment, and you also get more fish and income for the fishermen. Dual productivity instead makes a different claims. In systems where ecology and economy are interdependent, the two kind of returns are no longer a primary and a secondary, but they are co-produced by the same process. So it brings that idea that the economic productivity, the environment, the biosphere is ingrained in your production function, into your value chain as a constitutional part of it, and it doesn't want to disentangle it. For example, a healthy marine ecosystem doesn't just produce fish alongside a functioning community, but it also shapes the community itself. When fishers become stewards of a resource, that regenerates, they change from being extractors to becoming people with a role, with agency in something that grows, and that restores their sense of the future as well in poor societies, like the case of Mozambique that I was mentioning before. It grows the willingness to invest of the whole economic sector in quality rather than a race to extraction. So in a sense, the concept of dual productivity embedded into your value chain from the beginning kind of helps to extend the realm of possibilities for new innovation and new ways for those communities, those economies to produce value in a way that also preserves or restores the environment. So it may sound like a little bit of a philosophical shift, but in reality, the real value of it is a practical one, because once you bring the environment at the core of your value chain, the way you design a project changes entirely, because you become explicit on the type of changes you want to see in that community, in that market. I use community and market almost interchangeably, because for me, a market is a locus for exchange. So you make them explicit into the narrative of why you're spending that donor money to achieve what kind of results, what kind of behavior changes. So then we need that operational tool to make that happen, and eventually even measure it. So SEAS organizes the blue economy into 6 system groups, which is quite familiar to what MSD was doing with the donut. At the center, you have the economic value chains and ecosystem stewardship. This is a way to explain what that dual productivity actually is in more practical terms. You can imagine this almost like as a value chain, where ecosystem stewardship is the demand for the value that value chains can produce. So it's some sort of a collective welfare in nature, in the biosphere, in the environmental context, and the value chains is how the market, how the social organization, therefore the market, produces those values. And then around the core, there are 4 enabling groups. So you have resource governance, which is how communities manage shared resources, support services, information, which is information, skills, market platform. You have the financing architecture, so how money flows and whether it rewards the right things for that system to continue, that exchange between value chain and stewardship. And then you have interconnected infrastructure, so water, waste, energy, food, but also those social infrastructures that allow increased participation in governance. Even, you can extend it ideally even to health or childcare or other social infrastructures that allow more participation and therefore also stewardship to be stronger. So yeah. Now, again, I just want to emphasize once more that the approach is not a model that wants to represent reality. It is a framework that wants to make sense when you're designing a project, if you want to achieve certain socio-ecological objectives, and it's putting those socio-ecological objectives at the center. And then it builds and describes the system around that to give you the boundaries of where your intervention may be for that core function to then be improved. In order to operationalize it, so market system practitioners already had used the donut as explained, but also have used another tool that gives a very broad map of that donut that is called the market system change wheel. So the market system change wheel, was initiated over 10 years ago by the Vicara Institute and some thinkers like Mike Field that work at the Vicara Institute. So they started with the design of the initial market system change wheel, which is a broad description of how a system, what are the elements that fall into a system, is very broad, is comprehensive of everything that you could think of, and potentially you could intervene if you had a project. And then that was declined for different sectors. So you have an agriculture market system change wheel, then a financial system came about, and then a housing and construction market system. So basically every project or donor that had a specific interest in a specific sector would then use that framework, that system thinking framework, and adapt the wheel for that. So in order to maintain the language of the practice, we've done the same. And we do have a blue economy change wheel. And then the structure of the system that I just presented to you before are reflected in it. So there are 6 system groups in the blue economy change wheel. There are value chains, ecosystem stewardship, governance, support services, finance, and interconnected infrastructure. And each group contains specific sub-elements, so which are the moving parts, right? The groups are just a conceptual way to organize them. So the subgroups, for example, for value chains, you may have fisheries, marine tourism, aquaculture, maritime logistics. With ecosystem stewardship, you have habitat protection, biodiversity monitoring, marine reserve management. Governance can have property rights, co-management arrangements, regulatory enforcement, and so on and so forth. In total, we have been able to map 31 sub-elements within the change wheel. And how do you use a change wheel? So you come to a specific country or a specific place where you have a problem. A problem means that you obviously have poverty or environmental degradation, and these two things may go hand in hand together very often. And then you need to understand, instead of investing directly on the problem, which is not wrong in itself, like when we started, that's where we started with a system thinking approach. Investing in the problem is not wrong in itself. However, it limits your capacity to achieve scale, because your dollar goes directly to solve the symptoms of a specific problem, but that problem will repeat next time. And also, if you instead focus on the root causes in the system, you may solve that problem at a much bigger scale. So with the dollar that you're spending in your intervention, you may deliver more benefits to a larger number of beneficiaries. So you come to the problem in the geographical area where you're intervening. You can use the wheel to start mapping and measuring how that system is functioning, and that wheel just gives you a little bit of a guidance. And for each one of the subsector, you have a rough evaluation of how that subsector is performing, whether it is at an early stage, so it has nascent institutions, where you have primarily informal rules that are dominating, and the functioning is quite at a small scale, or it is at a tipping point, so it's very mature, it's self-sustaining, there's innovation continuing in that subsector on that element, or you are in the middle. So basically the wheel allows you to use this lens to identify how the system is performing in the different areas, But also, while you're gathering that data, you can also understand the causality chains and how one subsector is important for the development of another one. You start building the structure of how that system is functioning and how the different parts of the wheel influence one another, which ones are relevant. So the wheel is purposefully broad, but then once it gets to be applied to a specific case, it gives you some sort of a snapshot. It becomes a reduced wheel with an assessment of different components. And that becomes also your baseline. And bear in mind that every intervention is also limited in time and limited in resources. So most of these assessments to design how a project is implemented need to be accomplished in the course of the first 6 months of the project implementation. So very rarely you go to collect primary data or you run large surveys. You need to have applicable tools that you can deploy and everybody understands. So this is SEAS, this is the wheel, and how the ontology of SEAS changes a little bit from market systems. Let us see what it means in practice and in the case of Galápagos, and I have just another couple of slides. So why is Galápagos very interesting? I started working on Galápagos 10 months ago, and I found it very fascinating. Obviously, I'm attracted to Galápagos like anybody would be. The nature is fantastic and so on. But Galápagos is very interesting for this case because it's small enough that you can see the whole system. You have 33,000 people, and all of these 33,000 people live on 3% of the land only, because 97% of the land is actually natural park. So the reinforcing loops and the constraints that normally in a large economy would be diffuse or are in Galápagos are very compressed and very obvious. You can almost see them if you go on the top of the mountain. You can see the whole economy right in front of your eyes. Then the main sector for Galápagos is tourism, and that makes it also easier to understand in terms of analyzing. The complexity is not that articulated, but is really, really important. You have roughly 300,000 visitors per year. That was the peak in 2023, but still these numbers continue. And each visitor, there's a difference between nationals and internationals, but on average, you can say that roughly $200 are spent for entry fee, una tantum, per visitor, generating roughly 66 million a year for direct revenue from tourism alone. And most of the rest that happens in Galápagos trickles down from that sector. Although many of the Ecuadorians would like to go and live in Galápagos because the level of unemployments are quite low and average income is much higher than the national average, yet Galápagos presents very high level of unsatisfied basic needs. So material poverty. Resident rate public services about 5 out of 10. You have potable water only scoring a 3 out of 10 because you have very few days where water is actually delivered. The waste management services are poor to non-existent. You have very often contamination of Escherichia coli, and the health facilities and health services provided are very low. You don't have you have a very, very low offering in terms of education. So either you follow a career path that is becoming a train guide for the marine park and that are normally sponsored by the park, or if you want to have any other sort of career, you need to migrate to the mainland. And therefore, this has perverse effect on the capacity of the island also to take care of their basic needs, because you lack the competencies, and lowers the level of satisfaction, and the material poverty increases the material poverty of the population. Another element that I found very interesting is that the entirety of the electric system is produced by diesel. Therefore, there are projects for new solar plants to be installed, but these will only cover part of the demand. And the issue is that since Galapagos doesn't have a very developed infrastructure for transportation, all of the oil barges that are coming from the mainland are offloaded in not very stable or equipped berths, and oil spills are actually a real possibility. And there was a major oil spill a few years ago that affected and contaminated the whole island. So you have very high risks to undermine the main assets that is driving the whole economy, and the constraints are very real. So yeah, so applying the wheel and mapping the various sub-elements, you end up selecting those that are the most interesting. And you notice that the tourism value chain sits at the mid-transition. In fact, the sector functions, but there's no reward for quality. Hotel that invest in water recycling, for example, or in solar panels, pays the same interest rate if it's borrowing the money to do that, the one that doesn't. That's a failure in the finance group of the wheel, not on the tourism group. And then 51%, there's a 51% local equity rule. So the equity of any investment or business in Galapagos needs to be 50% local. That is to protect also migration, because they want to cap the number of residents that move to Galapagos, but that has strong limitation on the capacity for innovation and to bring in new technologies or new ideas. And that's a failure on the governance group. It connected to how the resident permits are distributed and how the selection happens. So at the end, what happens is that tourism moves and shifts to a volume over value type of business model. Also with the technological disruption of Airbnb and other platforms, now the vast majority of tourists are no longer coming through a formalized chain that controls quality and therefore also environmental impact. But over 60% of the tourists that are coming are actually land-based, and they book their accommodation on Airbnb. And government no longer is able to control the number of beds, and therefore also the number of tourists that are coming in. So a similar analysis is for the diesel dependency, because 50% of the island diesel goes to shipping, so to the barges and the boats. But the issue is that until September, at least, diesel was subsidized to keep it at the same price as the mainland, and therefore there was no incentive to build efficiency on the marine fleet and as well as in the local and land transportation. So this is just to give you a broad sense of how, in such a small economy, you can really apply a tool that can tease out all of the different stages of development of different issues across the whole of the system, and then build a narrative that really can deliver that vision for broad change. And that narrative would not happen if you were focusing only on fisheries, for example, or if you were focusing only on tourism, for example. That sectoral vision would not bring you to the same results. This is clearly the archetype of the limits to grow. It is limits to grow archetype in action, because there's a reinforcing loop that sees tourism revenue growing, and the numbers are growing, the communities are touching more money, and that drives economic activity, that drives a pressure for more population growth to move from the mainland, and eventually investments in tourism of low quality, so it becomes a volume game. But then you have the lacks of investment in water capacity, water treatment, water processing, in energy, in green energy, logistics, and the whole ecological carrying capacity. So I was brought into Galapagos to think about the blue economy, and therefore they were expecting me to come back with ideas on how do we do tourism better, how do we do fisheries better. But I came back home saying, no, actually, we need to invest in water. We need to invest in basic services for the population, because those are the bluest sectors you can touch, even if they technically are not. Yeah. So I don't. So just to close, then that approach allows you to build a narrative that focuses on the structural problems of a specific economy. Here, in the case of Galápagos, you want to change the level of incentives that are currently rewarding volume over value, and then you work within the tourism or within the whole supply chains that provide services to tourism, including food, including agriculture, to build a coordinated effort to have certification at all levels. So, for example, if you are a tourism outfit, you get rewarded if you buy your food produced locally, because there's a lot of agricultural land. Nobody knows that Galapagos initially were colonized with cows. It was one of the main activities is actually husbandry, and therefore you want to have local produced supply chains, so to reduce the risk for spillage and marine traffic. Also, marine traffic is bringing around 1,500 invasive species, which become a direct threat to the whole of the ecosystem of Galapagos. It is a closed ecosystem, and therefore you want to keep that economy as close as possible. And then you have you want to diversify the risks for your physical and regulatory infrastructure, so that different communities can grow and more of the communities can participate into the economy. And then you want to make sure that the feedback loops in the system, such as incentives to, I don't know, borrow money from the bank or invest in a specific technology versus another, are then positive and continue to maintain the sustainability of the model that you are proposing. And that also allows you to structure those interventions from quick wins to structural reforms to system transformation. So with stages, which builds again on the market system approach that Dan was mentioning, because through facilitation, you want to start with interventions that drive local leadership. And those are the quick wins. They're not just accounting mechanisms to bring back results fast, but they're also ways to kickstart the system to make it move in the right direction. And then you want to encourage that process. So this is a very, very rapid excursus. There's more information. I've shared a couple of links before this, obviously with this presentation, but I also have a small paper that presents SEAS a little bit more broadly, and you have a vision of the wheel. Take into account that these are implementation tools. These are kind of the building block of how you design a program, how people like us reason and apply their knowledge in a structured way. So they are living documents in the sense that I did a post also recently on LinkedIn to the whole community asking for feedback. So now that wheel could improve. But I want to leave you with one controversial question for reflection as well. So I think one of the most valuable lessons that we can take away from what Dan and I have presented to you is actually that there is a professional body of people that when they implement when you think about donor money, it's not the money that matters, is how that money is being spent, what kind of program are being designed, what are the objectives, how they're measured, and so on. So there's a large body of professionals, as we have shown to you, that over the years has been always self-critical about how they're doing things with a mission or a drive to achieve more change, more sustainable change, more inclusive, and always questioning the results that they have achieved the year before to try and do something better and more. And that has brought to a change of the approaches and frameworks up to what I've just presented to you today. However, all of that debate was happening within the context of even a geopolitical framework that was reasoning not as a zero-sum game where the interest of one country is at the cost of the interest of another country, but the general ontology was that win-win solutions or positive-sum games are possible, and actually development lives and breathes in that space, a space of positive-sum games, and resources were directed into questioning how can we do that better. And that even allowed for certain governments to take risks, because once you start talking of indirect benefits, not going to the farmer directly and giving the farmer some seeds, but rather changing the system, which is much more theoretical in many ways, you as a government, you as a donor, you're taking risks because it becomes much harder to report back to the taxpayers on what you're actually doing with your money because it's so difficult to understand. So that space with the closing of USAID that happened at the beginning of last year, and with the changes in how now the cutting of funds, both from the US government as well as the European government, that is increasing, that keeps on going, and the reduction of funds also to the multilateral agencies, that space for reflection is kind of dissipating at the moment, and there's way less appetite to continue to have that dialogue. So our question is, where will that discussion on how do you actually do development in the future, what does that actually mean, and what are the right tools to do it, where the house for that dialogue, those discussions now is? That's the question that we have in our mind. Okay, maybe I can stop there and sorry, and open the floor for questions if you have any.